found this story, and it immediately caught my attention because of his discovery at such a complicated time. I was in a car accident with my wife and found out she was cheating on me while she was in the hospital. I never imagined that a single day could change my life so drastically. My name is Alex, and I've been married to Emma for almost a decade. We met in college, fell in love quickly, and got married soon after graduation. Our life together had its ups and downs, but I always believed we were solid. We built a home, shared countless memories, and supported each other through thick and thin. That belief was shattered one fateful afternoon. It was supposed to be just another routine drive to visit Emma's parents for the weekend. The sky was clear, and the road ahead seemed just like any other. I was behind the wheel, Emma was beside me, and we were chatting about mundane things. Our plans for the upcoming holiday, her latest project at work. Little did I know, this drive would mark the end of the life I thought I knew. We had just passed the halfway mark of our trip when Emma's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and quickly put it back in her bag. I didn't think much of it at the time. Our conversation continued, but she seemed a bit distracted. I chalked it up to her busy week at work and kept driving, focusing on the road ahead. The highway was unusually busy for that time of day. Cars zipped past us, and I remember thinking how impatient some drivers could be. Emma had just started talking about her mother's new garden when it happened. A truck in the lane next to us swerved suddenly, forcing me to react. I jerked the wheel to avoid a collision, and before I knew it, we were spinning out of control. The screech of tires, the shattering of glass, and Emma's scream all blended into a terrifying cacophony. The last thing I remember before blacking out was the sickening crunch of metal against metal and the world turning upside down. When I came to, I was disoriented and in pain. The car was on its side, and the windshield was shattered. The acrid smell of gasoline and smoke filled the air. I could hear distant sirens approaching, but all I could focus on was Emma. She was slumped over in her seat, unconscious, with blood trickling down her forehead. I called out her name, my voice hoarse and panicked. There was no response. My heart raced as I struggled to move, every motion sending waves of pain through my body. I reached out and touched her arm, praying for any sign of life. Just then, her eyelids fluttered, and she let out a soft moan. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived as the reality of our situation set in. We were trapped, and the help couldn't come soon enough. Within minutes, paramedics and firefighters arrived on the scene. They worked quickly, cutting through the wreckage to free us. I was pulled out first, and as I was loaded onto a stretcher, I caught a glimpse of Emma being carefully lifted from the car. Her face was pale, and she was still unconscious. The fear and uncertainty about her condition were almost unbearable as we were rushed to the hospital, sirens blaring in the background. The ride to the hospital felt like an eternity. Every jolt and turn of the ambulance sent sharp pains through my body, but all I could think about was Emma. Once we arrived, we were whisked away to separate emergency rooms. The medical staff moved with a practiced urgency, their faces a blur as they assessed my injuries and hooked me up to various machines. Lying there, staring up at the harsh fluorescent lights, my mind kept drifting back to Emma. I asked every nurse and doctor who came by about her, but no one had any answers. It wasn't until later, after I'd been stabilized and my wounds treated, that a doctor finally came to update me. Emma had suffered a concussion, several broken ribs, and a deep gash on her forehead that required stitches. She was still unconscious, but stable. I was eventually moved to a hospital room to recover. The pain from my injuries was constant, but it was nothing compared to the gnawing worry I felt for Emma. The hours dragged on as I lay there, alone with my thoughts, replaying the accident over and over in my mind. I kept thinking about how quickly everything had changed and wondering what the future held for us. As night fell, a nurse wheeled me into Emma's room. Seeing her lying there, connected to so many machines, was a gut-wrenching sight. Her usually vibrant face was pale, and the steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sign of life. I reached out and held her hand, silently willing her to wake up. Hours passed in a blur of medical updates and sporadic visits from hospital staff. They encouraged me to rest, but I couldn't tear myself away from Emma's side. My mind was a whirl of emotions, fear, guilt, and a desperate hope that she'd pull through. Finally, In the early hours of the morning, her eyes fluttered open. She looked disoriented, her gaze unfocused as she tried to take in her surroundings. I squeezed her hand gently and called her name. Emma, it's me, Alex. You're in the hospital. We had an accident, but you're going to be okay. Her eyes met mine, and for a brief moment, I saw recognition and relief. She gave a weak nod before her eyelids drooped shut again. It was a small victory, but it was enough to lift my spirits. The relief I felt when Emma first woke up was short-lived. As the hours turned into days, my physical pain began to ease, but my emotional state grew increasingly fraught. I oscillated between overwhelming concern for Emma and a growing unease I couldn't quite place. She remained in and out of consciousness, her recovery slow but steady. During one of the quieter moments, as I sat by her bedside, I began to reflect on our relationship. Our busy lives had kept us somewhat distant lately, but I had always attributed it to work stress and the usual ebb and flow of marriage. Now, sitting in that sterile hospital room, the little things started to gnaw at me. Her recent aloofness, the secretive glances at her phone, the late nights at work. One afternoon, while Emma was asleep, I stepped out to grab a coffee. In the corridor, I overheard two nurses talking. They mentioned a visitor who had been asking about Emma, a man whose name I didn't recognize. Curiosity and a pang of jealousy flared up, but I brushed it off, convincing myself that it was probably just a colleague or a concerned friend. Still, the seed of doubt had been planted, and it began to grow, feeding on my anxieties and fears. That evening, as I sat next to Emma, her phone buzzed on the bedside table. The screen lit up with a message from someone named Chris. Without thinking, I picked up the phone and glanced at the notification. It read, "I miss you. I hope you're okay. Can't wait to see you again." My heart dropped, and my hands began to tremble. I knew I shouldn't invade her privacy, but I couldn't stop myself. I unlocked her phone and opened the messages. What I found confirmed my worst fears. There were dozens of texts between Emma and Chris, detailing a relationship that was clearly more than just friendship. The most recent messages were filled with worry about her condition after the accident, but the older ones were more intimate, with expressions of love and plans to meet up. Stunned and heartbroken, I put the phone back on the table and stared at Emma, who was still sleeping peacefully. The woman I had loved and trusted for so long had been living a lie. The weight of this revelation was almost too much to bear. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of betrayal and confusion, my mind racing with questions and the bitter sting of disbelief. The next morning, Emma woke up looking better than she had in days. I, on the other hand, felt like a stranger in my own life, a whirlwind of anger and sorrow swirling within me. I knew I couldn't pretend everything was normal, but I also couldn't find the words to begin the conversation I dreaded. As I sat by her bed, trying to mask my turmoil, Emma reached for my hand. "Thank you for being here, Alex," she said, her voice weak but sincere. The gratitude in her eyes made my heart ache even more. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Emma, we need to talk," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. Her expression shifted, a flicker of apprehension crossing her face. "While you were sleeping, I saw a message on your phone. From Chris." Her eyes widened, and she quickly looked away. "Alex, I can explain," she started, but I cut her off. "I saw the messages, Emma. All of them. How long has this been going on?" My voice cracked with emotion, the hurt and betrayal evident. She sighed deeply, tears welling up in her eyes. "It started a few months ago. I never meant for it to happen, but things between us haven't been the same. I felt so alone, and Chris was there for me. I'm so sorry, Alex. I never wanted to hurt you." The room fell silent as I absorbed her words, a mix of anger and sadness churning inside me. "Why didn't you talk to me? We could have worked through it together," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I was scared," she admitted, her voice breaking, "scared that you wouldn't understand, that we were too far gone to fix things." I stood up, needing to put some distance between us. "Emma, I need some time to process this. I don't know what happens next, but I can't stay here right now." Without waiting for her response, I walked out of the room, the weight of her betrayal heavy on my shoulders. I found a quiet corner of the hospital, a small waiting area where I could be alone with my thoughts. My mind was a tumult of conflicting emotions: anger, sadness, betrayal, and a deep sense of loss. The woman I had shared my life with had been unfaithful, and now I was left to pick up the pieces of a shattered reality. Hours passed as I sat there, staring blankly at the wall. I replayed every interaction with Emma over the past few months, searching for signs I had missed. Every late night at the office, every unexplained text message, every moment of distance between us now took on a new, painful significance. The truth was like a knife twisting in my heart, each revelation cutting deeper. Eventually, a nurse approached me, gently reminding me that I needed to rest and take care of myself. Reluctantly, I returned to my own hospital room. The bed felt cold and uninviting, a stark contrast to the warmth I once felt in our shared home. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma's face, heard her voice, and felt the weight of her betrayal all over again. In the following days, Emma and I had several difficult conversations. She was remorseful, tearful, and full of apologies. She confessed that her relationship with Chris had started as an emotional escape from the problems we were facing, but had gradually turned physical. Despite her apologies, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal and mistrust. Each conversation left me feeling more conflicted, torn between my love for her and the deep wound she had inflicted. Navigating the aftermath of Emma's betrayal was a lonely and painful journey. I found myself grappling with decisions that would shape the rest of my life. Despite the turmoil, I was not without support. Friends and family rallied around me, offering a listening ear, comforting words, and practical assistance. Emma's parents visited regularly, expressing their concern for both their daughter and me. They pleaded with me to consider reconciliation, emphasizing the years we had invested in our marriage and the love they believed still existed between us. Their words were a balm to my wounded heart, but I struggled to reconcile their perspective with the deep hurt and mistrust I felt. My own parents, while equally supportive, urged me to prioritize my own well-being. They reminded me that trust, once broken, was not easily repaired. Their unconditional love and pragmatic advice gave me the strength to prioritize self-care amidst the emotional turmoil. In addition to familial support, the hospital staff, nurses, doctors, and counselors proved invaluable. They provided not only medical care but also a compassionate ear and guidance through the emotional tumult. Their presence offered a semblance of stability in an otherwise chaotic time. Through it all, I grappled with conflicting emotions: anger, sorrow, love, and a profound sense of betrayal. Each day brought new challenges and difficult decisions, but with the unwavering support of my loved ones, I began to find clarity amidst the turmoil. As days turned into weeks, I faced the daunting task of making decisions that would shape my future and Emma's. The conversations with her had become strained and repetitive, circling back to the same painful truths. She continued to express remorse and pleaded for a chance to rebuild our marriage, but my heart remained guarded. I sought solace in long walks around the hospital grounds, grappling with the weight of my emotions and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The advice from friends and family echoed in my mind, each urging me to follow my heart while cautioning against hasty decisions. One afternoon, sitting alone in a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria, I made a decision. I knew I couldn't ignore the deep-seated hurt and mistrust that had taken root in my heart. Despite the years of shared memories and love, the betrayal had irreversibly altered the foundation of our marriage. That evening, I returned to Emma's room, her eyes searching mine for any sign of reconciliation. "Emma," I began, my voice steady but heavy with emotion, "I've thought long and hard about us, about our future." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I can't erase what's happened, Emma," I continued, "and I can't ignore how deeply you've hurt me. I need time to heal, to figure out what's best for both of us." Her shoulders slumped in resignation, but she nodded in understanding. "I understand, Alex," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." With a heavy heart, I kissed her forehead gently before walking away. The weight of my decision settled over me like a heavy blanket, mingled with a sense of relief and the daunting uncertainty of what lay ahead. In the days that followed, I focused on healing both physically and emotionally. I leaned on the support of friends and family who continued to stand by me with unwavering loyalty. The hospital eventually discharged me, and I moved back to our now empty home, the silence echoing the void in my heart. Emma and I maintained sporadic contact, navigating the logistics of separating our lives intertwined for so long. Legal proceedings followed, marking the official end of our marriage. Through it all, Emma remained apologetic and remorseful, but I knew that trust, once shattered, was not easily rebuilt. Time proved to be the greatest healer. Slowly, the sharp edges of pain dulled into a bittersweet ache, a reminder of the love we had shared and the lessons learned. I threw myself into work, reconnecting with old hobbies and rebuilding a life that was solely mine. Months turned into years, and I found myself in a place of peace and acceptance. The scars remained, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. I learned to cherish the good memories while acknowledging the pain of the past. Life moved forward, presenting new opportunities and challenges, and I embraced them with a newfound sense of strength and clarity. Looking back, I realized that the car accident had not just fractured bones. It had shattered illusions and reshaped my understanding of love and commitment. While the journey had been painful and filled with uncertainties, it had also been transformative, paving the way for a future grounded in authenticity and self-discovery. And as I stood on the threshold of new beginnings, I knew that I had emerged from the wreckage not as a victim, but as a survivor, resilient and ready to embrace whatever life had in store.